Today's segment of SoundBalming is brought to you by Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Body Care. I cannot express to you how much we love their products. Although we use them all year, as the weather gets colder, we need these products even more. The dreaded drop in temperature, the dryness, the itchiness, and the unnecessary flakiness is inevitable. Shea butter from Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Body Care is the only thing that works for my skin and hair needs. Not only do these products cure my dry skin, the whipped butter goes on smoothly and doesn't leave that uncomfortably thick, sticky residue. Bonus? It smells absolutely amazing. There are so many different scents to choose from too. Not only do they carry skincare products, there are products for authentic living, face, shower, hair and beard, spritzers and perfumes, and bath products. Let me tell you, we cannot even keep the stuff in the studio. The entire production team as well as all our children use Jimmy and Mary's product. Jimmy and Mary's take pride in creating quality, handcrafted products from simple ingredients for the entire family. Their products are made for all skin types and are 100% handmade, 100% vegan, and 100% cruelty-free. Skincare is important. Moisture is key, and keeping our skin and hair hydrated is essential. I cannot emphasize how much we trust Jimmy and Mary's for all of our skincare needs. Hurry on up to jimmyandmarys.com and check out their products. Did I mention service is fast and efficient too? Don't forget to mention that you heard about Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Skincare on SoundBalming. Use the discount code SoundBalm20 to get 15% off. That's SoundBalm20 for 15% off at Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Skincare.
Hey everybody, welcome to SoundBalming. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bombs. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the show,
LaMarr, Darnell Shields.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time of the day it is. I'm just so excited you decide to hang out with me. Welcome to my show. I'm your host, Dr. LaMarr Darnell Shields, the creator of SoundBalming. And my goal with this show is to introduce you to people with ideas that will help you unlock your full potential. Now, we know in the world, there's so much grief going on from what we're seeing on the news and the media, all media outlets, from COVID to wars to racial aggression all over, just to death all over the place. And we know that grief comes in many forms and so many variations. You know, it's something we all have to deal with at some point. I mean, you cannot escape it. Well, at least I know I haven't been able to escape it. Although we don't like to think about it, grief is something that is unavoidable. It covers a broad range of experiences. Grief can be felt because of a death or illness, the loss of a friendship or relationship, divorce, moving, switching jobs, losing your faith, your team losing, whatever it is. There's so many forms of grief. Well, my next guest is all too familiar with grief and loss. He started researching the evidence for survival of consciousness soon after the death of his daughter in 2002. Devastated by the loss, he needed science to tell him if she still existed in some form. So what do people do when they want to know stuff? They go out and do research. And then most of the time, they pull their partners in. And that's what he did. So in 2004, he and his wife, Phran, founded Forever Family Foundation, a global not-for-profit that educates the public about evidence that we are more than our physical bodies. He's a host of Signs of Life Radio, is a past editor of Signs of Life magazine, has the Foundation Medium Evaluation Certificate Program, writes a blog, and is the author of The Medium Explosion, a guide to navigating the world of those who claim to communicate with the dead. Bob and Forever Family Foundation are currently featured in the Netflix series Surviving Death, which we're going to show a clip shortly. Bob, welcome to SoundBalming, brother. Let our listeners know how you are doing and where you are calling in from.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you. Can I call you LaMarr?
You can call me LaMarr. Yes, sir, brother. You may.
Okay. Well, thank you, LaMarr. I'm speaking to you now from Florida. I spent most of my adult life in New York, as you could probably tell from my accent. Right?
You can never shake that New York accent. I don't care
what accent.
Can never shake it. So how are you doing? I know there's a pandemic in Florida, like there's a pandemic in the other 49 states. How are you doing mentally, physically, and spiritually?
Okay. Listen, dealing with, as you mentioned, in your discussion and the opening remarks about grief, it does take many forms. I mean, my interest is specifically grief as it relates to loss of a loved one. I say loss. Some may correct me and say, well, we didn't lose them. They know where they are, but and COVID, we're finding now that people are, for the first time in their lives, contemplating their own mortality. We tend to think of ourselves as invincible, or anything is possible, but nobody's quite figured out yet how to avoid death. And we spend our lives trying to avoid it. And that can result in fears and phobias, and it affects the way that we live our lives. And if we can come to grips with that, we could find meaning and purpose in our physical lives and have a much more fulfilling life.
Well, welcome to SoundBalming. Florida is one of my favorite places. I was just there 2 weeks ago in Pinellas County working with the great teachers and educators. And I know you guys got a whole state debate about this mask mandate. We're not going to get into any of that, brother. We're going to leave that on the table. Okay. But as a specialist in grief, you speak with many individuals who are struggling after loss. Can you talk a little bit about the different forms of grief that you often see people display? And is one any more debilitating than another? And then if we can talk about how you came to wanting to do this work about grief, dealing with grief, because I know you lost your daughter and then eventually lost your partner, your wife.
Yeah. Well, I'll start at the beginning. So I'll answer the second part of your question first. This may sound strange to a lot of people, but on the morning of September 1st, 2002, my wife at 3:00 in the morning sat straight up in bed, shot up like a rocket, and she was shaking and she was trembling and she was ashen white. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Something horrible is going to happen today." And I said, what does that mean? What is something horrible? She said, "I can't tell you the details, but I know that it's going to be utterly devastating." And, I was a materialist, logical, left brain thinker. I didn't believe in ESP or precognition or telepathy or an afterlife or any of that stuff. But I took it seriously because there were times together in our lives when she would have these episodes, precognitive episodes, and she would tell me about things that were going to happen, and every one of them happened exactly the way she described it. So logic told me if she was right then, she could be right now. And I watched over my 3 kids as any parent would do, during the day. One of my oldest was going back to college the next day. My middle one just started her college career, and my youngest one was working at a part-time job. And at the end of the day, I let my guard down. I let it fade from my awareness. We went out to a restaurant. We had 2 cars. Make a long story short, my son and my daughter left in one car. My wife and I followed about a minute or 2 behind. We came upon a horrific accident, and our worst fears were realized. And My son and daughter were in an accident, and my daughter didn't survive her injuries, and my son had very serious brain injuries and was airlifted to a hospital. After it became clear that my son, he was in a coma, he came out of the coma, everything looked like he was going to recover. It suddenly dawned on me. I remembered that day. I said, well, how did she know? Because she, meaning my wife, she knew. That started me on a quest to find out if there were credible people that studied consciousness. And I wanted to find out if it was possible, A, if my daughter still survived in some form, and B, if she was okay. Questions that most people who have suffered the loss of a loved one, will ask. So I started crisscrossing the country and meeting with medical doctors and scientists and researchers, and took part in research. I read literally hundreds upon hundreds of books. My wife on the other side was a spiritual person. She had an inner knowing. She didn't really need the science, although she respected it very much. And, that's how our story began. But in answer to your second question, as you so aptly put it, I mean, we grieve many, many things on a daily basis. Oddly enough, sometimes the things that we grieve, we think are monumental as they're happening to us. 24 hours later, it's if something else changes it, and it's like it never happened. So there's grief, and then there's grief, and we have to put things into perspective. My interest is in, grieving the death of a loved one. And what we've found, and there are a lot of clinical studies to support this, is that those who believe that their loved ones still survive in some form do better in their grief than those who don't. And it makes sense. I mean, what could give you more comfort and hope than believing that your loved one still carries on and you're going to see them again? And what we found is that the evidence points to not only do they still exist in some form, but they retain their memories and their personalities, which is mind-boggling. I understand to many people who may be listening to you now, but the evidence is robust. And so that's a little bit of where I'm coming from.
So what do you think, Bob, what do people get wrong about grief? There's this huge debate. You said the science and the spiritual piece. We're going to dive into that shortly, but what are some things that people get wrong about grief?
Well, people think that they get advice and they think there are rules to grief. There are no rules to grief. I've literally met thousands of people over the years who have lost loved ones, and every single one grieves differently. Specifically, we're not grief professionals. We just provide information. But what we find is that many mental health and grief professionals counsel their patients to separate from their loved ones. In other words, okay, that happened, now move on with your life. Whereas other progressive thinking therapists have started to see that it's better to tell them to keep, foster the relationship that you had. It's obviously in a different form. You don't have them physically with us, but embrace that thing and always respect and cherish it. And it's not a question of separating that out and then moving on with your life. It's finding out a way to integrate the two. Grief, we know, is paralyzing. I mean, I don't mind telling you, for probably 2 years after the death of my daughter, I just wanted to curl up in a ball and make the world go away. I thought there was absolutely no way that I could survive, her death. It was a fight for me. It doesn't come overnight. There's no magic pill. I reached a point where I know that she still survived. The science opened the door for me. Then I became open to these personal experiences that a lot of people don't talk about, but yet they have.
So you talk about the grief of losing your daughter, and I know you've done tons of research with mediums and psychics. We're going to talk about that. But let's stop right there for a second. Can you share with us, Bob, what are some things that you did? What are some things that you needed that you might not have been getting from maybe some of your counselors or some of the experts in that area? Because there's somebody that's listening right now who's watching, what's happening, let's just say in Afghanistan, who's grieving right there. There's somebody at the hospital right now who is hooked up to a heart monitor or defibrillator because he or she can't breathe because of COVID. What are some strategies that you use that work for you?
For me, and again, everybody is different. I had to I just knew that recovery had to come from within. People say all sorts of things to you, like from different walks of life. Like I know that they would come up to me and thought they were being helpful, and they would say, well, your daughter God took your daughter because he needed another angel. And I'm like, really? He need another angel? He doesn't have enough angels after the millennium and, millions and millions of souls. Didn't make any sense to me. The same principle, only picks the roses, that was not helpful to me. People would say things that they thought were helpful. For me, I was like laser focused. The only thing that would give me comfort, if I was reading a journal or reading about research or reading a book that talked about life after death that made sense to me, that gave me, some relief. To others, it doesn't. That's the part of it that I knew that I had to stop thinking of myself as my physical body, because if I believe that I'm my brain and that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, then when my brain dies, then I am dead forever, and there's no possible way I could continue. But if our mind, and instead of mind, you could say my soul or my consciousness can operate independently of my physical brain, and there is evidence to show that it can, then life after physical death becomes logical, because we're not our physical brains. We don't die with physical deaths as we know it. So for me, I just had to get all the pieces that reinforce the belief that I'm not my physical body, and that, we tend to think everything in life we think of as permanent. The chair we're sitting on, the rocks. This feeling of permanence is what sets us up for grief. I mean, in reality, we're here for a short time. Everything is temporary. Why should we think that everything is permanent and rock solid? We're on this spinning globe that's traveling 1,000 miles an hour through the universe. What's permanent about that? So, to me, once I was able to think of myself as not my physical body, that would bring me comfort.
So you bring a very interesting point about what people say when they come to you. They like, yeah, God needed your daughter. She was a rose, so he plucked her. I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking about Dr. Wayne Dyer, who I have a lot of love and respect for, who transitioned, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember he was sharing a story, Bob, about a guy who lost his dad, and his best friend did not come to the funeral, didn't reach out to them. So as they got older, they run into each other in the store. One was trying to hide, the one who didn't go to the funeral was trying to hide from his friend. And he bumps into him, serendipitously, he just bumped into him. And he was like, hey, how's it going? And he was like, man, I'm sorry I didn't come to your father's funeral, that, the other. He says, I just didn't know what to say. And the guy whose dad died, he said, that's all you had to say, is that I just didn't know what to say. So in this grieving process, what are some questions that we should ask someone who is grieving? Because I know as a person who writes at Johns Hopkins, I research trauma, and we know the one thing you don't say to people is dealing with trauma. What's wrong with you? We typically say, what happened to you? What are some of the questions we should be asking our friends, our partners who may be going through the grieving process, instead of saying stuff like, I know what you feel like? No, you don't. You don't know because you lost a person, but you don't know what it feels like to me. So what are some of those questions to ask someone who is grieving, so we don't sound like jerks?
Yeah, well, you raised a perfect point. That's probably the worst thing that you could say is, I know how you feel. I remember having somebody come up to me saying, after I lost my daughter, I know exactly how you feel. My dog died recently. It's like, no, you don't know how I feel. You just want to punch him. But when you just said about that story that Wayne Dyer told, where somebody said, well, that's all you had to say is, that I didn't know what to say. I just tell people, give me a hug. If you give me a hug, that says more than 5,000 words, because you don't know what I'm going through. You can't possibly know. And just, having your support in the form of a hug is all you need to do. I didn't want to, a lot of people and a lot of grief therapists will tell you that it's very important to be surrounded by loved ones and friends and engage. To me, I just wanted to be left alone. For me, I knew I had to work it out on my own. And instead of, and I would feel exactly what you said. People, I'd be uncomfortable. I'd be standing in the crowd. I saw the look on everybody's face. They didn't know what to say. What I do when I find somebody, and you mentioned at the top of the podcast about these grief retreats. We have these grief retreats, and despite all the information that goes through, and the most important thing is that the people at these retreats are among people who truly do know what they're feeling. And there's a lot of hugging that goes on. Of course, now it's a problem because of COVID, it's hugging with masks, so to speak. But there's not a lot that you can say besides the other thing that you could possibly say is reflect upon wonderful memories of that person. But I loved her. I mean, she was the life of the party. She was the smartest person I ever met. She was so good at lacrosse. I mean, she, or something that you could reflect fondly upon. I mean, that I think can appreciate it. But most of the other stuff there's not, other than being there and giving them a hug, there's not much you could say.
Well, you bring up the grief retreats, and we know that you and your wife appeared on the Netflix series Surviving Death. We're going to take a quick look at that, and then just let us know what we're listening to, what we're seeing, and what we're actually hearing.
Welcome, everybody, to our annual Love Knows No Death grief retreat. I'm Robert Ginsberg, and I'm the director, and I'm one of the co-founders of Forever Family Foundation. Hiding behind the wall here is my other half, Bob Ginsberg. Our purpose is to provide you with many methods by which you can learn to foster and facilitate your own communications. So the entire weekend experience is designed to allow you to understand that death is not final.
After my daughter passed, I was a total basket case. I just wanted to crawl up into a hole. Now, I was a materialist left-brain thinker, right? The notion that you could survive physical death to me was ridiculous. Gradually, I changed some vague hope into belief, and if you're lucky enough, you turn that belief into a knowing where it's no.
So, Bob, share with us what we just saw in the Netflix series Surviving Death. What was going on there?
All right, so Netflix asked if they could come to these grief retreats, and we also hold these big conferences and conventions and all this different stuff that we do. The most important work is the grief retreats. We limit it to 50 people because we want it to be a small, intimate experience. People in all stages of grief come to these things. And what we have is that we have mental health, grief professionals. We have mediums that we have vetted, that we know can really do what they claim. We have metaphysical practitioners, and it's a whole environment to let people know, and we show them also the evidence, the established evidence that we survive a physical death, and they're immersed in all of this. We also try to teach them techniques that they could use to foster their own experiences, getting into altered states of consciousness, mainly through meditation, meditation could take many forms. It could be a walk through nature. It could be listening to music. It could be appreciation of art, but some zone that you get in that opens up the channels and puts our chatter mind aside. So, other information can flow. So it's a total experience. Some people go, as I mentioned, we have a bunch of mediums there, and they do readings for people. Not everybody gets a reading. You can't really control that. But we've seen if somebody is kind of on the fence about this stuff, and then they get a powerful reading with a medium where very, very obscure, specific information comes through, information that the medium could not have known or looked up, that has the power to flip these people, from the chasms of despair to comfort and hope. And we've seen it time and time again. People come in on Friday, sometimes they can't even speak, and they certainly can't smile. And Sunday night they go home and you're joking with them. So we call them grief transformation. Again, not to suggest that it's a cure for grief. That's a silly notion, but it puts people on the right path to get back and find some meaning and purpose. And when my wife was passing and it was near the end, she was in home hospice, and the hospice nurse said to us before she left, "Do you have any questions?" And I was just out of medical questions at that point. So I said, "Yeah." I said, "Can you tell me the meaning of life?" And she just looked at me like, "Is this guy serious?" And she goes, "Well, that's a very difficult question." And my wife, as sick as she was, she said, "It's not difficult. It's simple. To leave this world a better place." And that's, those are words that I've since come to live by. Whatever you could do to make this world a better place, that, your thoughts and your actions, it's like the butterfly effect, it just exponentially, explodes. And I believe that your actions in this world reflect upon your existence in other realms of existence, not from a religious perspective, but just from all the reports and research that I've come across.
Well, I must admit, I was really excited to bring you on when I read your bio, and my great producer, Nicole, was sharing, of course, Netflix, the docuseries, which I had seen myself. And it also gave me an opportunity to pull out an old book that I had read called The War of the Worldview, Science versus Spirituality, which was written by Deepak Chopra and Leonard, I think his last name is Lodeniao. I'm probably jacking his name up, but the book is called War of Worldviews, Science versus Spirituality. And I'm looking at the docuseries, and I'm listening to you speak. I'm looking at some of your videos, and I'm like, this guy is definitely going in a different direction, where he's bringing in not only just counselors, grief counselors, but he's also bringing in psychics, and what I call them mediums or seers, because I'm a believer in that. As you said, I believe that we all have those gifts. I'm close to several mediums. But my question is this, before we get into your research and data collection, because that's the nerdy part of me, the research and data collection, what role does the brain play in functioning when it comes to trauma and all that other stuff. But should psychics or mediums serve as grief counselors, do you believe?
Yeah, absolutely not. And they should never represent themselves as such, unless they also happen to have a degree or in mediumship is serious business. When you think about it, in what other profession, especially one that deals with the public, and especially ones that deal with people in various stages of grief or mental situations, there are no governing bodies. There's no certification board. There's no set of ethical standards. There's no body that evaluates your proficiency. There's no continuing education. Tomorrow, I could say I'm a medium and hang up a shingle and say, "Hey, come visit Bob the medium. Charge you $500 for a reading. Give you all general blah blah blah." And it happens. People in grief will latch on to anything because they desperately want to communicate, with their loved one. And the mediums that are frauds will pick up on that. They use certain cold reading techniques, and they repeat the same information a couple of times. We caught one medium that was doing a reading on Zoom, and she had the person, the sitter, the person she was reading, had that person's name. So I had a Facebook page up on her screen and was reading back the information that she saw on Facebook. And there's a lot of stuff you could find on social media. Mm-hmm. I say in my book that based on my experience and observation, 85 to 90% of all mediums out there cannot do what they claim. 10% or 15% are extraordinary, and they absolutely can. But that 85% is dangerous, because they're out there sitting with bereaved people that are on the ledge, and so there's a tremendous responsibility that comes with it. So
let's talk about that tool that you use, the sort of quantify and qualify sort of the statement that you made about those individuals are not qualified to do it. Because it's interesting, as you were talking about this woman reading this bio, I was thinking about the scene in Ghost. I don't know if you remember the scene in Ghost. One of my favorite movies. Whoopi Goldberg sitting there,
Great movie.
Patrick Swayze, coming into the room, and a Latino woman who was there. Her name is Maria. Of course, if you know anything about Latino culture, many of them, believe in mediums and spirits. And so she said more money. So it's funny, but then it was also taking advantage of individuals. But you've created some type of tool mechanism to sort of see who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. What does that process entail?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. So in 2005, after meeting with scientists at a couple of different universities that study consciousness, I got input from them on designing our own certification program because it didn't really exist, and so we put together a program. I like to think I enhanced it a bit. So since 2005, we evaluate the evidence that mediums provide to the sitters, and we have 5 different scoring methods. We do it under controlled conditions to make sure the sitter has no knowledge of the medium and vice versa. And we train the sitters, the people who are getting the readings, on how to score the information. So they're well trained when they go in. They're told, you don't volunteer information to the medium and how to score it and what to look for. And so consistently, since 2005, only 10% of the mediums that we've evaluated actually gained their certification. And, incidentally, we're a totally not-for-profit, all-volunteer organization. We don't charge the mediums. They can't pay us for being on the site. We don't charge for membership, and we have, well over 11,000 members. And the reason we don't charge is because that would dilute the integrity of the program, So based upon that, and I've witnessed, hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of medium readings over the years, I'm not suggesting that, that 85% of the mediums are frauds. Only a small percentage of them are. But you mentioned that we all have intuitive ability, and that's true. I mean, just to various degrees. I think, we can go back to the ancients, and who sometimes, commune with their ancestors on a regular basis. I mean, there were indigenous tribes that communicated with each other telepathically, still do to this date, but it's been weaned out of us in our society, since the scientific revolution so we're told that this stuff can't be real. So, we don't use it. These abilities have become atrophied. But, so, what happens with some mediums? They have intuitive ability. A friend of theirs said, hey, you should become a medium, and they say, hey, yeah, I can, because I see so-and-so on TV and say, I could be like her.
Almost like a stand-up comic, man. Yeah. Until you get up on that stage, Bob, it's a different world.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might get one joke may pass, but then you have to come back tomorrow and then the next day and then the next day.
You're right, exactly right. And you got to keep doing it. And it's, so, they can be weeded out very easily, because, the top mediums in the world they don't get everything right, but they have a 90% accuracy in the information that they provide. So when we're evaluating the evidence and somebody has a 10 or a 15% accuracy rate, you or I can do that, just by chance, so they don't have the ability. And we want to make sure that we can't control anything. We can't stop. I mean, we've evaluated mediums that have very successful businesses, and they continue on despite not passing our certification. But
so you don't out the mediums that don't pass the test, do you? There's not like, in college now. Well, I don't know. My daughter's in college. You can sort of go online, look up. Let's say Dr. Bob Ginsberg. He's teaching English, and the kids score him, score you. You don't do anything like that at all.
No, and we promise total anonymity to the medium, so we don't disclose it, so they feel more comfortable. Because really, a lot of the mediums that are more popular, there's no upside to them getting certification. They have all the business that they need, so there's only if they should happen not to pass, and that got out. So it wouldn't be good for them. So we promise that we don't disclose who passes, and well, obviously people know who passed because it's on our website. but we don't tell who went through the program.
So I referenced this book. I'm going to come back to the book that I referenced. I don't know if you read the book by Deepak Chopra. I was about to say Tupac, not Tupac, but Deepak.
Yeah, I've done the same thing.
That's a different person.
Yeah.
And there's always been this debate between science and spirituality. It's framed as like a knockdown fight for truth, and a winner takes all. What I'm hearing you say is you're describing how science and spirituality can work hand in hand to bring comfort to the bereaved. Would you say that this is a new phenomena, or would you say you're looking at it maybe from a different lens, or you're adding on to some of the work that other people have done?
I think it's always been, if you listen to many of today's leading physicists, you have to sort of do a double take. Did I just hear that? Because they sound like spiritualists. So the physicists today are discovering what the spiritualists and our ancestors knew, years and years ago. It's the same thing. Science and spirituality are not mutually exclusive. They talk obviously in different language, but they're talking about the same thing. We're all connected, that we live in these fields of information. We're driven by light, and compassion and love and connectedness. Is nothing new. We're just, I think today what's happening is we're rediscovering things that we once knew long ago. So I think, today, since we started in 2003, I think there's more of an openness. And what we try to tell people, if we're going to change worldview about ourselves and about death, we have to get people to start opening up and sharing the experiences that they have. Because ultimately, I'm not so sure that proof is going to come from science. I think that worldview will be changed into this new paradigm by everybody sharing about this dream visitation that they had, or about this unexplained phenomena that occurred, or this vision that they had, or this voice that they heard. Because today, we're afraid to discuss it because we're afraid of being judged or labeled. We don't tell our family, we don't tell our friends, we don't tell our colleagues. I know medical doctors that have these profound experiences they haven't told a soul because they don't want to put their careers in jeopardy.
I tell everyone about my experience. I have several friends who are mediums. I don't know if they're on your list, but one in particular, once a month, we do a show. And what's interesting, Bob, everybody that typically comes on the show, they want to know about someone who's transitioned, which I'm finding very interesting. And they want to know if the person is okay. If the person is okay. And typically, if she can connect with that person, not all the time, if she can connect with them, and they typically do say they're okay, that they're over, looking over you and things of that nature. But why are people so concerned about, are the people okay when they leave this planet, or when they leave this space that we call Earth, or this particular space? What's the big concern with that?
Well, the big concern is that it's instilled in us that that death is final, and we're extinguished forever. What they're really saying is, are they extinguished, or do they still exist? And we want to see the evidence. It's one thing, and faith-based belief is fine and works for a lot of people, whether that's through religion or whatever other source. But a lot of people, they want to see the evidence. Like when I'm screening mediums and we send out an application, one of the questions I ask them is, what do you think is more important, like messages of love or evidence? Personally, I would hope that they would say the evidence is more important. Some mediums say no. As long as they give a message of love, that's great for the sitter and their job is done. No, because let's face it, whose mom doesn't love them? If I am the medium and I'm bringing through your deceased mom and I'm saying, LaMarr, and I give you 10 pieces of information, and you're thinking, wow, there's no way that I could have known that. And then I say, LaMarr, by the way, I'm really feeling it. Your mother's telling me to tell me how much she loves you. Then you can accept and embrace that message and believe it, because I already identified and cemented the fact that I'm talking to mom. But if I just come out and give you a message of love, yeah, it's nice, but does that really prove to you that she still exists? So, and some of the messages are wonderful and profound, but they have to be preceded. Give me the evidence first, then give me the message.
Well, speaking of messages, I know one message that typically comes through when you're working with these mediums, you're able to measure the brain waves of mediums. How are you doing that? And then what are you seeing different from these mediums that may just be someone who's just a typical person sitting down and you're measuring their brain waves?
Yeah, first of all, I don't conduct any research on my own. I just do some informal research, but not using scientific protocol. But we support research and we highlight, one of the members on our board is doing fantastic research. She's from Johns Hopkins. I've taken part in some research where the investigator or scientist, hooks up the medium to apparatus that measures, brain waves and tries to distinguish what parts of the brain are more active when they're engaged in this communication with the spirit world. And they found correlations in areas of the brain that light up or go dark. Incidentally, I was very surprised in one of these sessions because I pointed out that there's a difference between somebody engaged in spirit communication and in psychic information. In other words, mind-to-mind communication with two living entities is different than mind-to-mind communication with an entity that no longer has a body. And, it's said that all mediums are psychic. So I wanted to test that out. So I asked the scientist if I could interject I used called Zener Cards that were developed by J.B. Rhine back in the 30s, who was conducting, like the father of ESP research. And they're just geometric shapes, 5 different geometric shapes. And you turn over the card one at a time and you ask the sitter, to guess which card's going to come up. So by chance, they'd have a 20% chance of getting the card right because 5 cards, so you have 1 in 5 chance. And what I found that these mediums who were extraordinary mediums, I know that because I've tested them myself, were below chance when it came to guessing the cards, so it's not the same skill set, if you want to term it that, So, being psychic, that's why a lot of people said when they went to a medium and say, I went to a psychic, but there is a difference, So just between the two.
Out of all the research that you've been doing and all of the mediums and psychics that you've been engaging with in conversation, what are you learning about life? And also, what are you learning about afterlife that you might not have known prior to you doing this work?
I find myself in a constant search for meaning, just trying to make sense of it all. In the spiritual community, most people will say to you that there are no coincidences, that there is no such thing as chance. I don't personally believe that. I think that, sure, there are coincidences, but, and there are things that are not. There are synchronicities, there are things that are definite signs. There are things that maybe, planned, but we have free will. We have all these branches. We go through, take different paths. And, it's comforting, I think, especially if you've lost somebody, to believe in fate and that this is divine, intervention, and this is the way it's supposed to be, because that means that you don't have any control of, you didn't have any control over what happened. So there wouldn't be any guilt and there wouldn't be any regrets because, this is it. I don't believe it. I think that the purpose of this life is that it's the only place in this continuum of existence where things are random. And how we handle everything that's put before us, the good and the bad, that's how we grow, and that perhaps once we exit the physical life, the randomness will start to form a coherent, pattern. There's a great shaman that I was once reading, and he said that, life is like being at a football game. When you have the box seats on the ground, you can see the violence and you could hear all the grunts and the noises and the chaos. But it's not until you move to the very top row of the stadium that you see all the organization and the patterns, and maybe that's always struck me because, I think that this world is chaotic and random by design. It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it's not. But when we leave this physical world, we'll see the purpose of everything.
Would you say death is the end?
Absolutely not. A lot of people would say the opposite, that death is the beginning.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate everything that you've actually shared with my listeners. Bob, how can my listeners get in contact with you? And also if they want to get a copy of your book, and if there's a medium or a psychic that's listening to the show that wants to participate in what you're doing, how can they do that?
Well, the website is spelled out foreverfamilyfoundation.org. One of the sections of the website is a medium certification session. If somebody's a medium and they think they have ability, it gives the directions on the process of how to get the ball rolling to be evaluated. I write a personal blog called beyondthefivesenses.com. And the book is called The Medium Explosion. And, that's just available on Amazon and wherever you buy books. So I appreciate you having me on the show and appreciate the questions.
Yeah, well, we're not done. The second part of the show is called the Super Bomb Questions. And these questions are a little different. They go a little deeper, but I need you to answer those questions as quickly as possible. And
okay.
This is by Mountain Made. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, Bob, what's your favorite word?
Afterlife.
What's your favorite quote or maybe a spiritual verse?
I mentioned it already, to make this world a better place.
What's your superpower?
Telepathy.
What's your spirit animal?
Never really thought in those terms. Can't really say I have one.
Okay. What moves you to tears of joy?
Everything.
What moves you to tears of sorrow?
Everything.
What do you wish you had more time to do?
Right. Oh, it's therapy for me.
What guides your heart?
Empathy.
If you were in the Mr. America talent competition, Bob Ginsberg, what would your talent be?
Boy, you got me with that one, LaMarr.
All these talents you have, brother. You've been researching, you've been talking, engaging people, hooking up folks with monitors on their brains. You go on that stage, what would you roll out for?
I don't know if they judge you by compassion. I'd like to think that's what I have.
I love that. Well, Bob Ginsberg, it's been a pleasure hanging out with you, engaging with you, watching. I want to encourage everybody to definitely check out the Netflix docuseries, Surviving Death. It's an amazing show. And I also want you to reach out to Bob and just listen to everything he's discussing. Even if you are a skeptic, learn as much as you can, because there's something greater than us that's out there, wherever it is, but it's something greater than us that's out there. So Bob, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, LaMarr.
And I also want to thank my amazing engineer, Alexander Blanc, my super duper producer, Nicole Klimpaka. Supremacy for our theme music, but the most important person are you, those listeners. Keep tuning in, subscribe to the show, stop being stingy, and share me with all of your friends. Leave a comment and go out and do something for someone other than yourself today. And thank you for listening to SoundBalming. Peace.
The Super Balm questions are brought to you by Mountain Made CBD. Mountain Made is changing the CBD game by offering a line of high-dose CBD tablets at an affordable price. Their products are THC-free and third-party tested for accuracy, cleanliness, and potency. Their products, which ship nationwide, include Build for CBD saturation, Boost for precision titration, and Recover for rest and rehab. With 9 years experience in hemp and fitness, Mountain Made's founders are focused on creating a quality product to help those who live an activated lifestyle. Check out mountainmade.life Again, that's mountainmade.life to find out more about how their products can help you crush life. Remember, their products ship nationwide. Go check out their website today and follow them on social media at Mountain Made. That's the @ MNTMADE. Our staff at SoundBalming uses Build before a morning workout, which helps to push our bodies to a whole new level on a daily basis. Try Build, try Boost, try Recover. Our staff is using these products to enhance our active lifestyle naturally, and we are crushing life with Mountain Made CBD, and you can too. Start today by going to mountainmade.life and ordering Build, Boost, Recover, or the multitude of other products that they have which will enhance your lifestyle. I promise you, you won't regret it.